I am a guy who thinks I'm important enough that I'm talking on a podcast at you. Uh, I speak. I was just talking about the bravado and the confidence, the importance of, just kind of showing up and acting like you know your shit. But when it comes to me as a programmer, I think the reason that I've broken through in so many like contexts, whether that's creating content and sharing it online or showing up on social media or just like in business and as a coworker, is like I'm very, very comfortable being like, this is really fucking hard. This is complicated. I feel stupid right now. Do you feel? And like other people are silently feeling those things. And then it resonates. And I made it so much of my persona, I guess, and my self concept got infected by the false humility that I would present in order to ingratiate myself to other people or to make them feel safe or welcome. Where it's true, actually. When I founded Test Double, I was 26 fucking years old. I look at some of the code I wrote then. I was like, I was indeed very bad at programming. It is a goddamn miracle I was able to uh, trick enough people that I was good at programming who were better at programming, who came and joined the company and then did most of the programming. But like, I I've never let myself think that I was a good programmer. I would 10 years in to the company and I would say like I have achieved competence. Like whereas by competence, I mean I feel comfortable that I can build an app that works without a lot of help. That's it. And it took me until I was, damn near 40 to get to that point. Now you say that and people get upset because it's like, well, that's unrealistic. Most people could never like, work that hard and whatnot. And it's like, we need companies to like have all these trainings and so forth. Like I get it. Like that's all a real problem. I'm only talking about me. But even then, competence is a low bar. And what I think of as competence is actually probably way fucking higher than most people will ever get or most companies can demonstrate. And I'm kind of I hit a point. So Becky, for her app, needed a podcast feature. She wants to host podcasts. She wants to do a podcast like this one. I don't know why, but I'll get to listen to it, and I look forward to it. And the way that I host this is like very techie, and programmers can do this. I've got like a shell script that like uploads each episode to an S3 bucket somewhere. So that's not going to be how she does it. So I needed to build her a way or provide her a way to host podcasts. Now she could have done this herself. She could have gone to Anchor or whatever these like services are and pay a lot of money for an RSS feed that would just disappear the minute you stop paying them money. And she could have, but I was like, I just built you this CMS, this like content management system, this whole backend for your other aspects of your business, the Becky Graham blog, effectively, as well as the Build with Becky, members module. Like we could just add on to that CMS, to that backend, like a couple of models pertaining to podcasts, and then like a thing to schedule their publication, and then an RSS feed for them. Like it's not that many moving parts. Like all I'd really have to do is make sure that the stuff handling those attachments can now talk in terms of audio files, and make sure that all the MIME types line up, and that it validates the file and so forth, and measures how big the file is, because that's one of the things you need in your iTunes RSS. And we'd agreed I would work on it, but it was going to be a someday project for me. I was like, record a few episodes first and then call me and then I'll build this. But she'd expressed, at some point last week, no, not even, it was like Tuesday, that she wanted to record a podcast, not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, like within a week. And I immediately was like, oh man, I told her, I was like, I feel pressured now to like turn this around. And because it was clearly like she wanted not just to record a file and have a file on her computer, she wanted it out. And that's fair. Like if I make something, I want it out as fucking soon as possible, right? So I decided, instead of making this about, oh well, darn it, like now I got to stop doing what I'm doing and spend who knows how long to make this podcast feature. I decided to sit down and be like, you know what? If I don't want to do this so bad, why don't I use all those tricks of the trade that I tell other people about and just see how fucking fast I can do it well? And so I did. And I spent that day, 2 days ago, I got up at, 7:30. And by noon, I had a working podcast hosting thing with like the UI that she would need and like scheduling and all that. And by about 2 p.m., I had the RSS side of it all figured out. And it was generating feeds that looked valid. And by like 3:30, 4 p.m., it was deployed and in production. And now there's nothing to see there, right? Additionally, you have the website side. So like, a highly cached with like Russian Doll caching, like a nice, like a front end. So like there's a homepage for the podcast and then also like lists out of the podcast and you can go into those episode shows and show with markdown, like, or she writes markdown. It'll show like the show notes, you know what a podcast website looks like. So it's like one of those. And I did it all in under a day. And I thought like, man, if this was just like, some Joe Blow team out there, this would have found a way to be a quarterly project. Like, oh, for this quarter, we're going to add product as hosting to this product, right? And it would have been a team of 8 people who'd like spend a whole bunch of time planning out like how they're going to do it and a lot of complexity and then sandbagging on estimates. I'm not saying this is every company. Don't get me wrong. But even if I was on a team of 4 or 5 people, like my expectations of others, I just have to drop to like the lowest common denominator because I don't know who's going to work on something. And so work is a gas because it will expand to fit its container. And by giving this project, I'm willing to give this project a day in my life. By giving it just a day, you know what? There's not a lot of automated testing around it. There's some, but there's not a lot. Like the factoring isn't perfect. There's 1 or 2 things that I probably duplicated that are somewhere else in the system that I didn't reuse. But I did reuse a lot. In fact, I reused more than I normally would have because I didn't want to have to reinvent the wheel. I did not want this to take a week because I only gave myself the day. But if you're just on a project and everyone's paid salary, it's so typical to see something like this, like just like could theoretically be done in a day, instead take weeks or a month. And then when it comes out, it's hard to do when a day-long task takes a month. It's hard to maintain focus. It's hard to maintain purity of line. Now, not only did the thing take a month, which is separately bad, but also its lack of focus resulted in other bugs and confusing user interfaces and data models that are super complicated and have extra shit all over the place. And now you got all these joiners and because the data model is complex, now we need a Postgres view in front of it. So that we can have that and query that. And then we have this other system over here because, actually, like we had 4 people working on the project and Jerry over there, actually, he wanted to do this as like a separate service. And so he's got this little module over here that we have to call over HTTP to get this back. Because it's finding the open graph image or whatever the fuck. I don't know. And that's just how it works. That's like how most companies are, right? So I'm not saying like that's bad. I mean, it is bad. I'm not saying like I'm way more brilliant than any other programmers that work at companies like that or on teams like that or have had that experience, because I've been that fucking guy, because that's what it means to be in a system and on a team in this current economy. But also at the same time, I'm kind of like, I'm sick of eating shit when I talk to people about how their team is so slow, or about like, their particular, like them as an individual, like their agency in the situation. I've been very much coming from the place for my whole career because I want to win people over and I want to please them, coming from the perspective of like, taking their side, be like, yeah, that does suck. It sounds like you're in a really tough system. Like, oh yeah, like the coworkers or that, like, like the environment there, it does sound like it's challenging and you're doing the best you can. But like, are you though? Are you doing the best that you can? Like, look, only you know that. I'm just saying that to make you feel better. What I'm finding is like when I sit down to make a thing, it is turning out a lot better than any of the apps that I actually use and pay for. It is more functional. It is faster. It is simpler. It is, I can't tell how much effort it takes to update the apps that I use. But like when I update it, it's because new dependencies came out and stuff upstream, or I'm adding features. It's not just like, how many times if you actually look at the updates in your app store, Is it just like bug fixes, right? Because they're starting from a place of a sinking ship and they've got to be patching constantly. Like, it's not that. Like, when I do shit, like, it just usually fucking works. And if I forgot something, it's so basic that it's like, oh, I forgot to plug the hose in to this other, outlet over here. Well, no, plug it in and it starts working, right? This post for me was important because it was me for the first time that I can recall on the internet being like, I am fucking good at programming and I'm better than most of you motherfuckers. I'm definitely better than a lot of teams of programmers out there in terms of what do you get for the time that you spend? The amount of person days or whatever. And like, that's uncomfortable because this is this is me tooting my own horn, but also like me pussyfooting around this for so many years and acting like these dysfunctional teams can just like magically migrate through good vibes and more pair programming into like being as like good as one expert who's just focused and giving himself a deadline or operating under a constraint that clarifies the vision and the needs for the system. Like, those are all things that you can actually do. And I think a lot of successful companies do manage this. You can have that energy and that mindset and that urgency and that focus and the liberating constraints. You can do that not just one time inside of a company, but you can splinter off lots of experiments that way. You could have a culture in a company that is that way. That's high. Instead of making one $500 million bet, you're making $501 million bets, or way smaller than that, right? So anywho, it was restorative. It was just getting to the end of that day and being like, not like patting myself on the back, not being like, I'm a fucking badass, awesome programmer. It's just like, no, it's like, I'm just doing all the shit that I've been talking about in conference talks for so long and writing blog posts about. I'm practicing it, and then I'm getting the outcomes that I said that like other people would get. But I can demonstrate it now. I see it happening, and am I gratified that I feel like this is like a capstone on my whole career now, that I can like have this product to just be like, yes. Yes, that's very gratifying. But like, if I'm going to keep on having a podcast and doing videos and stuff, and I've got aspirations of streaming me learning Swift, which I will also be very, very bad at. If I want to keep on having something useful to say to people like you at the other end of this line, then I need to be honest about the fact that like, it's not that like when your way, your approach or your solution isn't working or is resulting in a lot of bugs, I would find myself typically treating the symptom. Oh, it's a lot of bugs. Okay, well, let's look at the bugs and let's find a way to work through those bugs faster. It's like, oh, your team doesn't get along really well and you don't collaborate super closely. It's like, okay, well, here's like some exercises you can do to foster pair programming. Like the right solution in a lot of those cases is, oh, you got a lot of bugs. Like, who's typing those things and what's going through their head, right? Like, maybe it's the wrong fucking programmers. Maybe they're not good enough at programming. As a consultant, I don't think I ever said that. I don't think I ever went to a client and be like, your programmers are insufficiently good at programming. Even though in my head, I knew that was like, it was axiomatic because like the programmers are never good enough at any fucking company. It's why there's so many of us. So I'm willing to just kind of call a spade at this point, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, it's a declaration of competence. Like I realize now that I've been bullshitting you for a long time to protect your feelings. Not you, but maybe you, depending. And I'm done doing that because it's unkind to you ultimately. And it's providing a lens that is unrealistically optimistic. Like, because a lot of these companies, like, yes, this team doesn't get along because that guy's an asshole, right? Pair programming is not going to fix that. There's not a practice that you can do. There's not a way you're going to just gently manage somebody like him out of the organization. Like, you can deal with the problem head on or not. And I would get there eventually with clients, but I would give every single possible, well, I'm sure whoever hired the person was like, no, whoever fucking hired him, they're on the watch list. Like, what the fuck, right? Figure it out. And so I've lost whatever remaining scales that I'd built up from the fear of conflict, from the fear of hurting somebody's feelings. And it's a theoretical fear, because I thought I'd post that and then get a bunch of people mad at me, and didn't happen. At least I don't, that or they didn't read it. But either way, it's making me feel like I will dish out better takes and advice that's more actionable. Like, because what's the point of advice on like how's the right way to program if it's devoid of the context that what you're solving for is actually not achievable in your current environment or configuration or approach or level of expertise? Like, the whole picture needs to be there. Otherwise, you'll end up like wasting time learning how to like, use one of my test double libraries when actually the tests that you're writing are the wrong tests, right? Like, I've decided I'm going to take a step back and be just a little bit more raw with you. And I realize that's going to be funny to the people who think that I'm already just like the most fucking unfiltered loudmouth that they've ever seen. I'm not about to say like, hey, watch me fly off the handle even harder here. I'm just going to try to be a little bit more honest. And so if that ever ends up hurting your feelings, sorry, not sorry is kind of where I'm landing.